So by show of hands, how many people here have experienced a lockdown drill while you've been in school? Most of us, I'm right there with you. How many of you during that lockdown drill were told these simple instructions? Step away from the door while I lock it, stay in the corner and be quiet. That was my high school as well. You're not alone. How many of you during that felt kind of scared or powerless? What would happen if that shooter entered this room right now? I'm there, don't feel bad. I was scared, I'll admit it. Well, for Parkland in February of 2018, those thoughts of what would happen if this actually occurred became reality. The shooter was actually in their school. For Marshall County High School in Kentucky in January of this year, the same situation happened. They were told go into lockdown. This is not a drill. There is a shooter in the building. The federal government recommends that every school has 2 lockdown drills per year. So imagine if every state had 4 high schools, 4 middle schools, 4 elementary schools. That's 24 drills per school per year. So roughly 1,200 drills overall in the entire United States. That number's slightly off though. My hometown had 5 high schools, but I wish I could say it was actually a lot higher than that, but it's not. Because as you're going to find out, not every state requires their schools to have these sort of plans. The Federal Emergency Management Association in 2013 posted in their Federal Guide for Developing High-Quality School Emergency Preparedness Plans that every school faculty member and student should be trained to first run, then hide, then fight. That's pretty effective, but can be improved. That improvement comes in a form of training called ALICE. ALICE stands for Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, Evacuate. It's not a linear approach, it's fluid, but I'll get more into that later on in the speech. Like I said, I'm a freshman criminal justice major. I've been experiencing these drills since I was in kindergarten, so that's 14 years ago for me. It's kind of bad that we have to teach a kindergartner how to do this. That's the trick with ALICE. It can be adapted to every single grade level. I've also talked to numerous law enforcement officers and school security guards about what they would suggest on how to counter a school shooter. They suggested the exact same thing that I'm telling you right now. ALICE. Shootings have been increasing since Columbine, but especially increasing in the last 6 years. John Cox and Stephen Rich of the Washington Post, in an article posted March 21st of 2018, stated there have been more than 187,000 students exposed to gun violence in the United States since Columbine. That's roughly 9,842 students per year. It's around 500 seats short of selling out Little John. Kind of put that in perspective for you guys, that's a lot of people. 34 states require schools or districts to have an emergency preparedness plan. 25 states require both. That's only 17 states, including Washington, D.C., that do not require their schools to have an emergency preparedness plan of any kind whatsoever. That's kind of bad, isn't it? Imagine going to a school where if a shooter enters your building, there's no training for what they're actually supposed to do. You're just kind of left on your own there. So the solution I'm suggesting is twofold. It's a right now we're in passive defense, but I'm also suggesting an active defense. In your school right now, this is your general classroom layout, correct? Everyone kind of agrees with me there? You walk into your classroom series. You have your door up over here. So if you go into lockdown, they immediately say hide in the corner. Well, you're going to end up hiding in this corner down here. You're just going to lock the door so you're out of the way of the shooter so he doesn't really see you. It doesn't really work, they're always going to check that room for you. ALICE is based in Ohio, and like I said earlier, it stands for Lockdown, Inform, Counter, Evacuate. The alert is the initial message. As soon as they detect a gun or a threat inside that school, they're going to send out that alert. That's the thing you guys hear of the big PA system saying, go into lockdown, lock the doors, begin hiding. Next up is lockdown. This lockdown isn't what you're used to though. It's not simply locking the door. This lockdown says, make sure that door is not only locked, but barricaded. Put chairs, desks, bookcases, whatever you can get in front of that door, put it in front of that door. Make sure it is as hard as possible for the shooter to get into your building. Next up is Inform. Inform goes exactly against what the North Dakota Department of Education states. The North Dakota Department of Education states that in a lockdown drill, students should be informed to not use their cell phones to communicate in any form, phone calls or text messages. What Inform is telling you to do is the exact opposite. They're saying use your phones. We all have our phones with us in schools. Professors, teachers say don't use them. In this situation, you want to communicate with the outside world. This isn't simply call your mom and dad. Yes, do that. That's a good thing. I approve. I would do it. But also talk to the local law enforcement. Say, hey, I'm in section B. We're hearing gunshots in section A. So when the law enforcement end up making their counterattack, which Alice does do training on how to approach that situation, they know exactly where to begin their search for the shooter to end the situation as quickly as possible. Next up, you're going to have counter. This is the stage where most people begin to question whether or not Alice is actually a good idea. Counter does not mean fight. By no means do I want you to go out and try and fight an active shooter one-on-one. You're going to lose that battle, I guarantee you. What counter means is that in this room right now, if a person was to enter that back corner, get up, run around, throw your backpacks, throw your books, throw your water bottles, throw your pencils, throw whatever you can get your hands on at that shooter to drive them out of the room as fast as possible. Also, how many of you guys play dodgeball? Right? How many of you guys quickly figured out that if the person's running around, it's really hard to hit them? But if they're standing still, it's kind of easy. The same principle goes with counter. If you're running around, it's very hard to hit you. If you're throwing stuff at them as well, again, really hard to hit you. Last up, comes evacuate. Like I said, Alice is fluid. I say evacuate should come before lockdown or inform. As soon as that alert goes out, if they say we have a shooter in the building, immediately check your surroundings. If you can get out of the building, get out. Run as far away as you possibly can. You will stand a better chance of surviving the further you are away from the shooter. After hearing my speech, if you agree with me, what I ask you to do is this. Lobby your congressmen, lobby your state representatives. Ask them to make these sort of policies mandatory in every single school and every single school district in your state. If you want to, I ask you to do this as well. Say the same thing to your congressman for the entire state. Ask them to make sure your state has a mandatory program in place. Alice is the best one out there for you. To make sure you guys have a response to these active shooters. But if I have not managed to convince you to do this, I hope these situations will. Think of Columbine, Sandy Hook, Parkland, Marshall County, any other school shooting you have heard of in any history class, any social class, any class whatsoever, and think. If they had used this system right here, the body counts of 19, 17, 20, what have you, could have been much lower. Next time you hear about a school shooting, ask yourselves, what if they had fought back? Thank you.